Hello, my name is Professor Thomas Noara, and in this lecture I'm going to teach you how to properly use a transition. The best way that I like to describe a transition is that it is moving time. And the reason I say this is if you build your outline properly, you will have multiple sections, and you can't just jump from one section to the next without an explanation that you are in fact moving. And the tool that we use to do this is called a transition. This will allow your audience to know that you are going from one point to the next. We do this by using our signpost words, which I have explained in a previous lecture. Our first, then, next, finally. These words help trigger your audience to know that you are going from one topic to a next. Here again, this is very important because of the flow that it provides for your speech, and it makes it easier for your audience to understand what and where you are going. There are two direct requirements in order to complete a transition properly. You must complete what is called an internal summary and an internal preview. Even though these are fancy words, they're very simple to do. And what they mean is that you must, in every transition, mention what you just spoke about and then what you are going to speak about next. This is the tool, as I said earlier, that will allow your audience to know that you are moving on. It doesn't matter what your topics are or what you're talking about. Anytime you're moving on, you must mention what you spoke about, and then you must mention what you're going to speak about next. You will see this in the examples I shall provide going forward. Before we learn how to write a proper transition, let's look at this outline example here, as this is what we've learned so far. We can see that the preview, which is the final portion of the introduction portion of the outline, is then followed by here where it says insert transition here. And then you have your first main point. What I'm showing you here is the link between your intro and your first main point. There are three types of transitions I want to go over and teach you how to do. The first one is the transition from your introduction to your first main point. Here's an example that I have. Now that you know, I am going to inform you about, here is where you'll insert the title of your speech. Let's first get started with, and here is where you'll insert the first main point's title. You can take whatever the title of your speech is and insert it in that first spot, and then your first main point in that second spot. And what this does is it allows your audience to know that you are done with the introduction portion of your speech, which is finished by your preview, and then it lets your audience know that you are getting ready to start your speech with your first main point. An example would be, now that you know I'm going to inform you about New York City, first let's get started with the cultures that can be found in New York. Here is an example of how that previous transition would look if you were writing your outline in keyword format. Notice that you are allowed to write your transitions out in full sentences. The next transition I want to discuss is going from one main point to the next in the middle of your speech. And I'm going to use a persuasive speech as an example here. If you were doing a problem, cause, solution, opposition speech, you could state simply, since I have just told you about the problem with insert your topic here, I want to tell you what causes, and then again, you would insert your topic here. You're mentioning that you just finished talking about the problem, which would be your first main point. And then you're letting your audience know with this transition that you are now moving on to what you feel causes the problem, which is your second main point. Again, we've done what we're supposed to by mentioning main point 1 and then main point 2. The final transition to learn about is how to transition from your final main point into your conclusion. You still have to mention what you just spoke about and what you're going to speak about next. So as an example, you can state, now that I informed you about, here you insert your final main point's title. We can conclude, or you can use any other conclusionary words to take your speech into the conclusion portion of your speech. In this example, I'm showing you how to transition into your conclusion. You can see here, I've labeled my final main point sports teams. My transition, after I've explained all of the sports teams, states, now that I've told you about the sports teams in Boston, let's conclude with a review of what I have gone over today. And what have I done here? I've mentioned what I just spoke about, mentioning my previous main point, and I've introduced what I'm going to speak about next. The signposts have led you to know that I'm now going to enter my conclusion. Please remember, in every transition, you must mention what you just spoke about and what you are going to speak about next. I know I have said it multiple times, but it is the key function of a transition to let your audience know you are done speaking about this topic and that you are moving on to your next topic.